Time is not a river but a coil, and every extinct race that ever walked Earth left behind more than bones and ruins. They left warnings etched into stone, encoded into light, whispered into dreams. For they knew the planet was not a passive world, but a sentient being feigning sleep, observing each rise and fall with closed eyes that still flickered beneath their lids. The sky burners of the first sun scribbled glyphs that melted through time. The ash folk of the Hollow Era wove lullabies into tectonic shifts, and the obsidian giants of the ice dusk buried their prophecies under magnetic fields. Yet no one listened, and so the last of the synth-blooded nomads died broadcasting their final message into space. She breathes beneath you. Now, in 2147, with the continents trembling ever so slightly and tides behaving like trapped animals, archaeologist Cale Vernor stumbled upon a ruin in the Himalayas where no GPS worked, no drone returned, and no bird flew overhead. There, surrounded by impossible architecture that defied known physics, he touched a triangular obsidian pillar that pulsed like it had a heartbeat, and in that moment, he saw, not with eyes, but with something ancient in him, dormant until, now, visions of past extinctions overlapping like shattered mirrors. Empires turned to vapor by storms that laughed, oceans rising to silent song-filled cities, and fire that spoke names as it swallowed flesh. He staggered back, blood pouring from his nose, hearing a voice not of a god but of earth itself, low and thunderous. Sleep is a gift I give, not a right you keep. And before he could speak, the ground groaned beneath him, not like a tremor, but like a warning sigh from something that had tolerated too many cycles, too many betrayals, too many forgotten signs. As Cale fled down the mountain, pursued not by beasts but by gravity shifting unnaturally around him, he knew in the marrow of his bones that the silence of Earth had always been conditional, and whatever slumber had held back its true self was fraying, because sleep implies trust and mankind had broken it. Cale didn't remember how he made it back to base, his boots soaked in melted snow, jacket torn as if clawed by winds with fingers, and his mind echoing with symbols he didn't know how to forget. He awoke on a cot under flickering solar lights, surrounded by malfunctioning tech and static-filled comms. But the worst noise was the silence, an unnatural vacuum that pressed in like a suffocating truth. And when he stumbled outside, the sky had changed. Stars had shifted positions, constellations warped into warning sigils, and the moon now held a thin crack across its surface like an opening eye. The other scientists were gone, tents abandoned, data drives still running scans that returned impossible results, magnetic fluctuations forming patterns identical to the ancient runes Cale had touched. He tried to call for help, but the satellite, dish face downward, embedded into Earth as if something had pulled it. Terrified but driven by the visions burning in his skull, he returned to the site only to find the triangular pillar had vanished, replaced by a shallow crater that hissed steam and smelled of ozone and old blood. Suddenly, the sky pulsed red, for a fraction of a second, and gravity faltered, just enough to make rocks float, heartbeats skip, and mountains moan in frequencies only fear could translate. Cale dropped to his knees and the voice returned, not in words but in weight, in the unbearable heaviness of ancient sorrow and fury. And from that weight he understood. Each extinct race had been warned not only of Earth's wrath, but of their role in waking it, of greed echoing like drums across millennia, of science used to poke into layers meant to be sacred, of satellites watching a sleeping god until it began to dream unclean dreams in return. Staggering back, Cale realized the world wasn't just feigning sleep. It had always been conscious, patient, and now curious, as if wondering what kind of pest it had allowed to thrive across its skin for so long. Across the world, reports surfaced. Jungles expanding overnight, machines rusting in real time, people hearing voices in their own blood urging them to kneel before breath. And yet, governments dismissed it as climate anomalies, rogue AI, interference solar flares, but Cale knew better. He knew Earth had shifted from dreaming to thinking, and thought could soon become action. His only hope lay in decoding the last message of the synth-blooded, those who died mid-transmission centuries ago. She breathes beneath you. He needed to find the source signal, hidden somewhere beneath the Mariana Trench, where sensors had recently gone blind and tectonic plates hummed lullabies in a forgotten tongue. Time was collapsing, not linearly but emotionally, the world remembering its own wounds, reacting like a being no longer willing to tolerate infection. And as Cale prepared to descend into the trench with a stolen submersible, guided only by haunted coordinates and half-mad intuition, he whispered to the world above, "I'm sorry we kept asking what's beneath us instead of who." The ocean did not reply, but the water's rhythm slowed, like a breath held. The descent into the Mariana Trench felt less like diving into water and more like being swallowed by a living memory, one too ancient for words, too vast for reason. Cale sat alone in the small, aging submersible, lights flickering, pressure gauges twitching nervously as if aware of what lay below. Outside the thick glass dome, the world grew darker not just from depth, but from something else, a thick, pulsing gloom that moved like it was watching him. Thousands of meters below, the ocean floor was no longer familiar terrain. It had shifted, reshaped, grown spires and ruins that had no place on any map, formed not from tectonic activity but intention. His sonar screamed and died the moment he crossed a threshold, a point where silence became suffocating, where the abyss blinked. Then he saw it. A monolithic structure larger than any city, buried beneath layers of rock and sea life, but humming, glowing, faintly with the same runes he saw on the mountain. It was not a temple. It was a lung. The realization struck like lightning. Earth doesn't sleep because it's inert. It sleeps because it must regulate its own fury. These structures, left by races long vanished, were not tombs or shrines, but devices, biological, metaphysical mechanisms to keep the Earth dreaming. And now, one by one, those mechanisms were dying. Cale's presence was not discovery. It was intrusion. As he approached the structure, the sub began to shudder, not from current or pressure, but from a low, bone-deep hum that penetrated the hull. Suddenly, the voice returned, not as sound, but knowing. Earth spoke not in language, but in memory, and Cale saw them all, countless civilizations, each believing they were the first, the chosen, the invincible. Each warned, each silenced. He wept, not from fear, but from shame. We were never the first children, just the loudest. Kyle reached out, pressing a gloved hand against the glass as if to touch the massive structure beyond, and for a heartbeat, the glow brightened. Not in anger, in recognition. It had seen this moment before, all of it, again and again. The races changed, the story did not. Kyle realized he had only one choice. He could flee, survive long enough to tell a truth no one would believe, or he could stay and become part of the signal. Become a warning, a new echo in the deep. He closed his eyes, whispered a prayer he didn't know he knew, and let the ocean take him. The last thing he felt was warmth, not from water, but from the world itself, like a breath drawn deep before another cycle began. On the surface, days later, seismic readings ceased. Storms calmed. The earth went quiet again, as if it had turned over, sighed, and resumed its sleep. But beneath the waves, in the dark where no human could reach, a new glyph pulsed on the lung wall. You were heard.